Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting of the DeKalb City Council, May 13, 2019. We have not gotten any individuals who, at this point during this meeting, have indicated they'd like to participate in terms of public participation. If you do, please give the form to our City Clerk, Lynn Fazekas, and we'll get you on at the appropriate time. We have a two-item agenda tonight for the Committee of the Whole, and I would like to start the meeting with the call to order and the roll call with Lynn Fazekas.
Jacobson. Finucane.
Here.
Stupeja. Fagan.
Here.
Noriko. Here. Verbic.
Here.
Favor.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
6 present.
Our third ward alderman, Joyce DePagia, has called me this afternoon, and she's not feeling well, so she will not be with us this evening. If there are no additions or deletions to tonight's Committee of the Whole agenda, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Noriko, seconded by Alderman Favor, that we approve the agenda of the Committee of the Whole. Any discussion? Roll call.
Finucane.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
Noriko. Yes. Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
6 aye.
Agenda is approved. Public participation, no one has indicated desire to speak at this particular meeting, so we'll move on to item D. We have two considerations tonight. The first is a proclamation for National Emergency Medical Services Week. I, Jerry Smith, Mayor of the City of DeKalb, Illinois, in recognition of this event, do hereby proclaim the week of May 19 through 25, 2019 as Emergency Medical Services Week. And with the theme EMS Strong, Beyond the Call, we encourage the community to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. I'd like to call upon our Fire Chief, Jeff McMaster, to introduce some special guests who will receive the proclamation that I have signed. Jeff?
Thank you very much, Mayor. If we could please have the DeKalb firefighters come up to accept the proclamation. We'd like to thank you, Mayor, for recognition of our firefighters for EMS Week. Accepting this proclamation is firefighters Harley Siddall, Matt Hoey, Zach Prelip, and Colin Jaraska. If you would please accept the proclamation. The DeKalb Fire Department is committed to delivering 24-hour professional emergency medical care to our residents and visitors. We provide immediate pre-hospital care to the sick and injured by responding with 53 medically trained personnel, 6 advanced life support ambulances, and 3 ALS fire engines. EMS accounts for 76% of all of our requests for service. Our personnel go beyond the call and are ready to respond at all times through consistent preparedness, education, and training.
Okay, we are ready to move on to your annual report, Chief McMaster. This is our DeKalb Fire Department 2018 annual report, and for this item, I would like to once again call on our Fire Chief, Jeff McMaster.
Thank you very much, Mayor. We appreciate this opportunity to stand before you, the council, and city staff to present our 2018 annual report. Before we dive into the meat and potatoes of this annual report, the members of the fire department do want to acknowledge some of the people that we've been working with. Our appreciation goes out to Dave Jacobson, Joyce DePagia, and Kate Noriko for your support through your years of service with us. We enjoyed working with you. We welcome back Alderman Favor, on your reelection, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. And we welcome Alderman-elect Carolyn Morris, Tracy Smith, and Scott McAdams, and we look forward to working with you throughout the next years. 2018 was a big time for the DeKalb Fire Department. This was a time of transition for us. Fire Chief Eric Hicks, he retired in November 2018, and while we talked a lot through the beginning of 2018, I remember him saying to me, we have to continue to change, okay? We're not going to change after I retire. We have to continue to change now. Now, you have the old adage that why fix a machine that isn't broken? The fire department works very hard to respond in a timely manner to all emergencies within the city. But we need, there's always room for improvement. And we change to uphold the values of our mission statement, which is consistent professionalism, to maintain public trust, to be accountable to the highest standards, and self-discipline for quality behavior. And that's why we continue to change and find where we can be a better fire department for our community. So there were three major transitional changes within the fire department. The first one was standard operating guidelines. What we call SOGs, are just basically guidelines. These are prescribed policies that firefighters follow both in emergency situations and non-emergency situations. Now, our old policy was 800 pages long, okay? And some of the policies were about 20 years old. Now, we did not rewrite all the policies in 1 year. This was actually a multi-year process in which we went through every one of these policies or guidelines and came up to incorporate new language, new terminology, new business practices that will help us become a more efficient fire department. Some of the policies that we highlighted, that I'd like to highlight, is the standardization of initial actions on emergency scenes, no matter who responds, whether it's an ambulance that arrives first, the shift commander, a fire engine, or even myself as the chief, that we follow the same prescribed plan, so we always can then, we can also try to predict what our next actions are going to be. We implemented a cancer risk reduction program. It is clinically proven that firefighters have a much higher risk of cancer than the general population. And we implemented processes and procedures and made procedures to try and lessen those risks and exposure to carcinogen. The city has been proactive over the last several years in handling building and code issues. We incorporated city policies in dealing with these code issues as we respond to calls into what we do when we respond. HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, that's a federal law in which to protect patient information. We incorporated the newest language into our processes, so we make sure that we protect the information of those that we serve. We implemented personnel resolution processes, and we also shored up our active shooter protocol. Now, the DeKalb Fire Department has had an active shooter guideline for over 5 years now. Unfortunately, these are incidents that you could see on the news on a regular basis. We're equipped with ballistic vests and helmets. We have tactical medical gear on all of our vehicles. And what we do, but we continue to shore up our policy to make sure that we are ready to respond if in the event an incident like this should happen. So that's our standard operating guidelines. We have always been doing personnel evaluations. However, there was a cooperative effort between fire administration and the firefighters union to upgrade our personnel evaluations. What we used to use before was very generalized, but we know that the fire service is a very unique animal in the way we operate. So we made our evaluations more task-oriented. We also incorporated a semi-annual check-in, which at the beginning of the year, the employees sit down with the supervisors, they go over expectations for the year, and then over 6 months, they have a check-in where they talk with each other and look at their strengths and weaknesses and how they can improve and what they're doing well. And then, of course, at the end of the year, you have the final evaluation. And then most importantly, during our annual process, we want to identify professional goals. What does the firefighter want to accomplish for that year or for his career? Okay? And then they have a mentorship program where the company officer will also work with administration so they know that they understand how to obtain their career goals that they want. The last is standing medical orders. Now, all of your EMTs operate under a physician's license. Okay, so we follow certain protocols called standing medical orders. So when we go to treat an injured or ill person, the paramedics know exactly what to do. So through the direction, cooperation, and training of Northwestern Medicine, Kishwaukee Hospital, and also IDPH Region 1, they really went beyond to really upgrade the standing medical orders in which we operated. And it's really a benefit that this community is going to continue to realize over the years. Some of the highlights of it is individualized patient care. Paramedics from 10, 20 years ago, you would meet your patient, you would go through steps A through G, okay, making your assessment. Now the care is very individualized. They really work to assess what is wrong with the person, what is the disease process, how can you stop it or reverse it as quickly as possible so you can get that person back on track to where they were before. So it's very individualized. There's new medications and dosages. They carry much more medication. Also, giving a medication was very standardized, where you just give X amount of a medication. Now almost all of our medications are based weight, so our paramedics go in, actually administer the medication that's right for that individual, so taking out the possibility of over or under medicating their patients. We've incorporated many new medical procedures. There is a lot more that our paramedics can do today to help their patients than they had even just a few years ago. There's specialized alerts now, such as cardiac, stroke, trauma, or sepsis. Kishwaukee Hospital, they have set teams where are ready to respond when we bring in a patient. So when our paramedics arrive at the scene of a medical call, they make a deep assessment. Once they identify what the true medical problem is, they can call in a special alert to the hospital. The hospital will then assemble a specialized team to be ready to accept that patient, giving them the more definitive care that they need to get them back on the road to recovery. And then last, emphasis is now on patients' overall income. Paramedicine many years ago was based on how do we go to the scene, how do we stabilize the patient until we get them to the hospital. Now emergency medicine, especially here in Region 1 and in DeKalb here, is once we get to the scene, how do we stabilize that patient and how do we treat them to get them on the complete road to recovery, to get them to where they were before they were ill or injured. And that is a massive philosophy change in EMS in our area. Now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of the fire department. Here are some numbers, kind of to let you know what we did over 2018. As you can see in this chart here, we hit a benchmark. For emergency response. Last year we almost hit 5,600 calls. This year we ran, or last year I should say, we ran 6,082 calls. That's 509 more calls than the previous year in 2017. That equates to a 9% increase in emergency response for the fire department. And we're now running 17 calls a day. When you start to look at, okay, well, what kind of calls, instead of just the base overall how many calls, we have fire and non-fire calls, and then EMS responses. If you look at the chart, since 2016 through 2018, we ran the exact amount of fire and non-fire calls, which was a little over 1,400 calls. But when you look at the lower right-hand corner, what you see is we went from just over 4,100 ambulance calls to over 4,600 ambulance calls. So that complete 509 calls that we ran more last year was in EMS and not on the fire side of things. That equates to a 12% increase in EMS responses. When we start to drill down a little bit more, when you look at this pie chart, 76% of all calls that we run are EMS related. Now that just isn't treating sick people or injured people. That also includes responding to motor vehicle accidents, disentangling people from machinery, and all sorts of different rescues, such as elevator rescues. When you move over to the left, we have hazardous conditions. These are conditions that could be potentially dangerous to life and health. That could be electrical calls, whether that's in a house or whether a power line drops on the street, a carbon monoxide call, or various arrays of hazardous materials calls. We also go on service calls, such as water and flooding, people in distress, or assisting other agencies. Of course, part of what we do with all the technology is out there, we go on false alarms. And then 2% of what we do are actual fires. And that could be all different types of fires. It could be a brush fire. Last year we had a fully involved semi-truck that actually turned into a 40-acre wildland fire, a wildland fire. It could be rubbish fires, vehicle fires, or structure fires. Now, when we look at the 76% of the calls that we run, which are EMS, there are different types of ambulance calls that we go on. If you look at the green section, 39% of what we do are BLS calls. That's basic life support. Okay? Those are people who may have fallen down, maybe twisted an ankle, need to be transported to the hospital, or just a general illness. When you look at the blue area, that's ALS 1. That's advanced life support. That's where we start getting more aggressive with the medical treatment to make sure that we stabilize these patients. That could include oxygen therapy, a 4-lead echocardiogram, which is taking a baseline heart rhythm of the patient. Maybe we give one medication, and then of course we give intravenous fluids. Now when you look at the red slice, that's ALS 2, that's advanced life support 2. That's the critically sick or injured people. And with that, you're still going to have the oxygen therapy. We'll actually take a 12-lead echocardiogram. That's when we take a 3D look at the heart to see how it's performing, trying to diagnose what is going with that heart to give them the proper care and medication. We'll give more than one medication and, of course, intravenous fluids. These are people who are terribly injured through a motor vehicle accident, some kind of high-end trauma, or maybe a massive heart attack, or maybe CPR is in progress. But 77% of all people that we respond to are treated and transported to the hospital, so a high percentage. A little bit about our fire department here. With our districts, we do, not only do we respond to the city proper, but we also have a fire protection district. When you look at the city, the orange area is Fire District 1, that covers the Sycamore Road Shopping District, downtown, some parts of NIU, and then of course Taylor Municipal Airport, DeKalb Taylor Municipal Airport. The dark blue area is Fire District 2, that covers the south side of town and I-88. The purple area, that's Fire District 3. They cover mostly NIU and the Annie Glidden North Corridor. Now you see in the lightly shaded areas, that's our Fire Protection District. Now we are contracted by two entities. One is Northern Illinois University, in which, just for your information, the city is in negotiations. We have been for the last 9 months with NIU for the fire service contract. They contract us for everything that we provide to the city. We also provide to NIU. The council can expect to be presented to a vote on an item sometime after July 1st. Okay. The other entity that we're contracted by is the DeKalb Community Fire Protection District, which you see are in the lightly shaded areas. So for the city, we cover roughly 15 square miles, when we include the fire protection district, we're up to 55 square miles that we cover as a fire department. A little bit about how we run out of our fire stations. We have our incident response by these fire stations. Fire Station runs the second most calls with just over 1,800. Station 2 runs just at about 1,600. But you can see Station 3 is by far our busiest fire station, running over 2,600 calls a year. Okay? 45% of our calls that we run out of Station 3 are in the Annie Glidden North Corridor area. And when you take a look at it in its totality, the Annie Glidden North Corridor is now 20% of all calls that we run as a DeKalb Fire Department. This chart shows you simultaneous call occurrences. Now we ask, well, why is this important to a fire department? When we talk about simultaneous calls, that's how many calls are going on in a 15-minute period. Are we running 2-3 calls simultaneously? The more calls you run simultaneously, that means units are out of service and fire stations are empty. And you can see that over 2,100 times we ran simultaneous calls last year. So this is something we continue to track, and we try to change response behavior if we need to. Looking at the 30-year trend, you can just see that we occasionally spike. We did hit our benchmark of 6,082 calls. You can see we spike and then we level out, but we're always on a constant incline. Just a little side information, so we looked yesterday, and last year was our benchmark year. This year, we are 200 calls more than we were at this time last year. So in theory, if we continued this trend, we could potentially hit 6,700 calls this year. But we'll keep an eye on that. 24-hour response criteria. This just shows that you do have a 24-hour fire department. Many municipalities are busy during the day and very slow at night. Not the DeKalb Fire Department. Our busiest time is from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m., but we run throughout the night, and usually our slowest time is around the 4 to 5 a.m. mark. Now, besides the nuts and bolts of what the fire department does, we also have other essential services. This is our more proactive way that we work with the community to provide our service. One is through emergency planning. The fire department is very active in incident action plans. This is looking at all city resources, not just the fire department, and planning out how do we respond during a large event such as Corn Fest or the fireworks at Hopkins Park. Fire administration worked closely with the airport manager to update its emergency operations plan to become FAA compliant. We also completed the emergency response guide for city employees. This is a flip booklet where if there's an emergency in any city building, the employee can look at it, whether it's a fire, medical emergency, a tornado, and they have listed what exactly they should do in that moment. And then, of course, we continue to evaluate and document building hazards and report those as needed. Public education is something that we're very interested in, that we're very proactive in, and it's from all ages, from preschools up to our senior citizens. Here's a list of all the different formal public education that we give. Some of the things that we do is community CPR, in which citizens can come into the fire station, be taught by a firefighter the American Heart Association curriculum for first aid and CPR. We also go into working with the school district. Our firefighters will go in and teach driver safety at DHS. We've also been heavily involved with the Illinois Greek Housing Fire Safety Act. The state of Illinois enacted a law that all fraternities and sororities shall be protected with full sprinkler systems. The fire department and fire administration have been working closely with property owners, with the sprinkler contractors, and Northern Illinois University to make sure that these projects get done. We have a third grade initiative to provide fire safety to all third graders in the city of DeKalb, in the school district. And then we regularly put, on a daily basis, we put safety messages out through social media. So if you have Facebook, if you follow us, you'll get daily weather updates, safety tips that are applicable to the season, and/or product recalls. Last is fire prevention, another proactive measure to try and prevent emergencies. As we know, the city adopted the 2015 International Fire Code, also the Building Code and Property Maintenance Code, and the fire department works to enforce these codes and other applicable city municipal codes. We do have a fire prevention officer that works with the Building and Code Compliance Division, and last year the fire department completed commercial building inspections. Not going to go through this long list of of inspections that we do, but if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you see that we identified over 3,600 violations. But the way you look at these violations is this is potential for somebody to be injured. Whether you identify that a suppression system doesn't work right, whether a fire extinguisher won't work when it's needed, maybe an emergency exit is locked, or maybe there's an electrical problem in these buildings. So the fire department was very active in trying to find solutions with building owners to correct these violations. Overall, everything we talked about is to fulfill the DeKalb Fire Department's mission, both proactively and reactively, and that is preventing injury through education, emergency planning, and code enforcement, rapid and efficient emergency response with aggressive firefighting, cutting-edge emergency medical service, specialized operations, and also working on conservation of property and the environment. And we have a true commitment, and we provide compassionate work to our community, whether on duty or off duty. Our firefighters come to work prepared to work on their shifts, but they are also very active in our community. I'd like to thank you for your time and welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chief McMaster. Let's open it up for questions or comments. Alderman Noriko.
I just want to say that it was an excellent presentation, and you really presented the full range of operations of the fire department. I think people often don't realize everything you do. And I am so grateful that you and the firefighters are here and serving the community so well. So thank you so much for your service. Certainly one of the highlights of my being an alderman was the training I went through with your department. I still tell stories about that. People can't believe I survived it, but I knew I would with you guys. But again, thank you for everything.
Thank you, Alderman Noriko.
Alderman Favor.
I just had a question about the guidelines. Is that, are those specific to DeKalb, or do you take like a national standard guideline and apply it to the DeKalb businesses and organizations that we serve?
All of the above. Our older guidelines were very specialized, so what we did is we took our old guidelines, we looked at guidelines that were recommended to make sure that we're compliant with state and federal laws, and then we looked at what other fire departments do that have similar hazards or needs that we have, and we incorporated into all. That's why it was so labor intensive. It took us about 3 years, but the end result is we have a guideline that is specific to DeKalb and our community and to our firefighters.
And is that training, is that so is every firefighter expected to know, I don't know, is it 800 pages still, or did we reduce
It is still about 600 pages.
Okay.
We'll give you that. What we do is we make it, it's broken down into many different sections. Chapter 4 is operations. That's the nuts and bolts of the SOG. That's how do we respond to vehicle fires, high-rise fires, regular elevator rescues, anything that where they're out in the community, actually on emergency response, that's a chapter that they need to know. If they need to know, just for example, how to deal with conflict resolution, that's something you can deal with back at the station. You have time to look that up. So Chapter 4 is the critical chapter in our SOG book.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Alderman Verbeek.
Yes, thanks to everyone for the services you provide, essential services. With the growth of calls, as a part of that growth, are there some people that are multiple requesters? In other words, of that percentage of growth, do you know somewhat how many people have multiple requests for services, let's say the same customer?
Yes, we do. We do have some people, because of lack of social services on a state level, we do keep track of those that call frequently. There are some people who may call in a month, may call 20 times a month. We do work with local entities such as Elder Care Services and many others to get them help, but we do keep track of those people who do have multiple requests.
Alderman Verbeek.
And to continue on the growth, and I guess for council, is with growth in those services, does that correlate to growth in expenses? In other words, if we have a 9-point percentage growth, what are those costs of services? And then what do we need to do to properly budget what is necessary as we look into the future?
Well, we'll continue to look at response plans and see how we can be more efficient in the services that we provide. There are many models out there with the loss of on a state and national level. There are models out there for where you're more proactive in medicine, and maybe you go check people's blood pressures and make sure that they are taking their medications properly. So alternative services, there are some costs. I mean, the staffing is the same, and as we respond, however, there are times where if we have many calls, we have to call back our firefighters. Also, with the use of more medical supplies, it is allowable that somebody can call for an ambulance, receive medical treatment from us, and then decline to go to the hospital. Well, that cost, we do charge them, but if they don't have medical insurance or no means to pay, guess what? That's on the city and the fire department. So we are supplementing their medical care. So those are additional costs that we have to continue to control as far as trying to get those people the help we need, be more fiscally responsible with the materials, with the supplies that we buy. We want to make sure that we keep, that we keep the costs low, and then to keep monitoring this overall.
One of the things I've learned, Mike, is that the fire department, along with a number of our departments for that matter, have been very proactive in seeking grants. I was here a couple of weeks ago with the Engebridge folks, and I think that was a $6,000 grant. You've invited me to a ceremony, I think it's next week, where you're going to get a $3,000 grant for some equipment or service. And I think we need to do that. I think we just need to continue to find as many revenue sources as we possibly can, and I commend you for doing that. I have one question. As you know, I have a number of questions as I see Chief Hicks and now Chief McMaster, as I do with other department heads during the course of the day. One of the things I think of, and I've never asked the question, but I will now, because it's something that I think every citizen in the city of DeKalb might be able to relate to. Trains, slow freight trains, trains that do not move, trains that are blocking intersections. How much of a problem are trains, slow trains and stop trains, to the fire department?
It is critical that we monitor this. I know I've worked with the city manager and with the police chief when we have had trains in the middle of town. What that does is That's why we have a fire station on the south side of town or the south side of the tracks in the event of a fire, and it does happen. There's limited ways to get across the railroad tracks if a train is stopped. A lot of our apparatus is so large it doesn't fit under the Pearl Street Bridge, so we have to go around to Peace Road. That puts minutes on the response time, so it is critical. So what we do is we do have a plan that in the event there's a train stopped on the tracks for a long amount of time, we will move staffing around to try and keep it equal throughout the city so we can respond to both sides. But it does add response minutes to our calls.
Thank you. Any other comments? Alderman Favor.
So this will just be for the new council members coming on. So 2 years ago, I was at the IML conference in Chicago, and the city of Rockford, I'd mentioned this to Chief Hicks. They have a program going with, I forget which of the hospitals, but they're collecting data on the frequent callers and users of the emergency system. And then the hospital is actually working with the fire department to provide services to those people so they don't need to be transported to the hospital, so it doesn't require an emergency call. It was a great program, really reduced cost, and actually because you're not tying up the services at the hospital themselves were willing to kind of pay for one employee to help with that. That might be something to look at in the future, but again, it was a great program, and it was at the IML conference. It was good to see, and something we could maybe look at here in DeKalb as well.
Absolutely. That's called community paramedicine, in which the fire department and the hospital do work together to provide those services without having to run a heavy ambulance with two trained paramedics, lights and sirens. So that is something that Rockford is a great model, and that is something we'll continue to monitor and consider.
Chief, would you talk about what I would call reciprocity between other communities, with other communities? I've noticed that often if there's a small fire or an incident, we'll see firefighters from Cortland, from Sycamore, from Maple Park, and I realize that we probably do the same for those people in Sycamore. They say, well, DeKalb's always over here. Explain what the procedure is there, and why do we see so many units responding at times to what I would call small incidents?
Okay, that's an excellent question. It's called the Mutual Aid Box Alarm System, and actually the state of Illinois was very proactive in that, setting that up. And what it is you basically have an agreement with the surrounding communities. Firefighting is an extremely labor-intensive occupation, and when you're fighting a fire and actually getting into a burning house and everything that's involved with it, climbing up ladders, dragging people and heavy equipment, you really need to rotate the crews out. Also, the equipment is also specialized. DeKalb has a ladder truck. It's needed on every single structure fire. So you come up with these agreements where if we have a fire, for example, we'll call the surrounding areas, and it's a tiered system. We don't call in the entire county. We'll call in maybe a few surrounding departments and have them respond quickly. And then if we utilize them, great. Otherwise, we send them back as soon as possible. And that's so we can rotate crews to keep them fresh, which if we keep the crews fresher, there's less chance of being hurt, and also it's healthier for the firefighters, because they have found that going through structure fires, not only the carcinogens, but the taxing on the cardiovascular system. So that's why we bring in all of these fire departments. The common saying is you give aid to receive aid. And so, especially with our specialized equipment and the professionalism of our firefighters, we're called upon to go out and help our stricken communities. Also, the DeKalb Fire Department is the keystone for special operations. So when you talk about technical rescue and hazardous materials, incidents, we hold the bulk of all the personnel and the equipment for the entire county. So even though you may have a small incident, such as a small hazardous materials leak of anhydrous ammonia, okay, they're not going to call other fire departments. They're going to call the DeKalb Fire Department because we are the full-time department that's there ready to respond with a hazardous materials team now. So that's how the mutual aid box alarm system works.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments of Chief? I'm going to ask one more. It's a brief question, but it's very important. And again, it's one that we've asked over and over and over in recent years. God forbid we have a major catastrophe, a tornado, something like that. What this community has talked about for some time is having an emergency preparedness center, and I don't know if that is the correct terminology. Where are we on that? And are we, as a community of 43,900 people, plus students at Northern, are we at risk by not having a centralized location from which emergency operations could be instituted?
This is an area that the city does need to commit to improve. And it's called the Emergency Operations Center. In the event of a major disaster within the city, this is a place where the stakeholders, the mayor and the council, where department heads, the city manager can all come together and make concrete decisions, track expenses, and deploy and call in all the resources that we need to handle this situation. There's two ways that you can go about having an EOC, and they both work. Is one, you can have a brick and mortar EOC where you have a designated building that's properly equipped to operate as an EOC with the technologies, with the monitoring equipment and such. The other is called a virtual EOC, and actually the state of Illinois uses this concept where you have software that in the event of an emergency, but maybe we don't need to come together quickly, we get on this software and we're able to run an disaster in the city from our personal computers, from our offices. And then if we need to get together every once in a while, we can get together in a concrete building. So there are different ways that we can go about an EOC. The fire department is versed in going about EOCs and such, and if that's something that we need to, or that we should continue to look at, we're more than happy to help.
Chief, operating a city is not easy. Operating a fire department, a police department is certainly not easy. We all would like certain things that perhaps we don't have. The city council is fully aware, as is our city manager, of the fiscal condition of this community. But I tell you, from my perspective, we are doing a lot with a little. And on behalf of the citizens of the city of DeKalb, I thank you for this report tonight. You know, when Chief Hicks left, the fire department really didn't miss a beat. You and Eric worked together so closely, I think, and so I commend you for that procedure that is continued. I thank you for your report tonight, and unless there are any other questions, I'd like to, again, on behalf of the citizens, thank you and the fire department for all you do.
Mayor and council, thank you very much.
Thank you. There is no executive session following this meeting tonight for the Committee of the Whole. With that being said, I'd like to call for a motion to adjourn this meeting of the Committee of the Whole.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Verbeek, seconded by Alderman Fagan. Any comments? All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. We are adjourned. City Council will begin promptly at 6 o'clock.